So welcome, Sam. It's lovely to have you with us. Sam is a former Hereford Sixth Form college student who's about to go off to study PPE at Oxford. So Sam, tell us about, where did you go to secondary school, and then what did you do at Hereford Sixth Form College?
Hi, yeah. I went to Whitecross Hereford High School, quite a popular one in terms of going on to the sixth form. And I did A levels in maths, modern history, and English literature, and also an EPQ.
Amazing. And so how did you find all your subjects? Which one was the kind of, I suppose, easiest? Did you find any particularly hard? Tell me about all your subjects.
There were definite journeys that I went on in all of them, as strange as that might sound. Like English, the English department's absolutely fantastic, as I'm sure you'll be glad to hear. But it was one that really, I was struggling with right up until maybe March, April of earlier this year when I sat the exams, and then it just finally begins to click. Whereas something like maths, which is just practice, 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 and that'll have a different sort of curve, but it's also very difficult. And history, I do like just learning things, and if you're willing to revise and take in lots of information, then history might be quite enjoyable for you.
Lovely. And I think that's often the case with English. It really does click late and students get a bit nervous. They're never going to get it. But it does come, it does come. And I think also it's actually all of the text that build up. And then tell me, how did you know you wanted to apply for PPE, which for those who don't know is politics, philosophy and economics. So you do a kind of big degree. So tell me, how did you come to that? Did you think you would always go off to a top uni?
Really, I never thought it was actually possible. I'd always, you'd hear of Oxford and it's held in such a high place, really. But really, I think it was year 10 or year 11, I heard of PPE as a subject, and then I took my A levels appropriately. But, really, it's still such an unlikely thing, such a challenge that you never know or think that you're going to go there, but you consider applying. That was for me, yeah, year 10 and 11.
And then when you came to college, how did you find the process? So you had reach lessons, and tell me a little bit about your time through sixth form. When did you start thinking, yes, I can definitely apply, and things like that?
Really, yes, the reach lessons which took place from, about the October, November of my first year. And then there was also things that you yourself had recommended that possible applicants look at, like HE Plus. I remember being a thing which was a Cambridge ran service which offered different live webinars that you could join about all different subjects, and that helps explore things. But then really it's towards the end of the first year, once you're very solid with or feeling more solid with your subjects, you might start to think about putting together a personal statement and getting a few ideas in your head of what are the necessary steps to apply.
And so had you done some reading by that point, or so what kind of things had you started reading? You just read articles, any books at that point?
I was actually very fortunate that, again, a service that you had suggested that people apply to, called Insight Outreach, and also the Oxbridge mentoring scheme is also what it's called. And that you can apply for that in the January. It's for people just like those who attend the sixth form, from very ordinary schools, who just wanted to see if they can push themselves. And then from around the March, I was put in touch with a tutor called Kieran, who had studied PPE, exactly what I wanted to do, and he gave great advice on not just applying for university in general, but a few tips and tricks with the Oxford colleges, and most importantly, some really great books to read that he personally had enjoyed.
Oh, fantastic. So you wrote your personal statement, submitted it, and then you had to go through the process of an admissions test. So you had to go through an extra exam to even get to interview. So tell us, what was that admissions test? What did you do to prep, and how did you find it?
So the admissions test for PPE is called the Thinking Skills Assessment, the TSA. And it's basically a 2 hour long exam, and it's got two major parts. The first hour and a half are a set of 50 multiple choice questions that will very much focus on your thinking skills. There will be almost your average brain teaser that you might see in a newspaper or in any sort of thing online, except you're doing them thick and fast. There's lots of little trick questions. 25 of them are going to be more focused on the wordy questions, and 25 are going to be more mathsy. And then the last half an hour is an essay where you get a choice of 4 questions, where you pick one to answer, And again, really the focus of these is not to test your knowledge, it's just to test the way you are thinking. Are you able to avoid the easy mistakes? And it's a difficult thing to be able to do that at a pace. But the TSA, there's plenty of past papers which you can find online. And I would also massively recommend looking on places like YouTube and just general websites in terms of TSA tips and tricks, because that definitely helped me see the paper in a new light. And then when I was going forward in revision, then there were new ways which I could see where to pick up marks and mistakes I might be making earlier.
Fantastic. And was there like a kind of threshold? Do they publish those kind of things where you think I've got to get to that particular level, or is it not like that?
So with all admissions tests, they'll be graded on these various curves, and there'll be lots of statistics and numbers you can crunch, and they are very, very scary. It seems like, how on earth does anybody get in? Because it's everybody's going to be applying. All the students at Hereford sixth form and all across the world, you're going to be brilliant thinkers and you're going to be really hard workers, and so it really is, there's absolutely no shame whatsoever in finding the papers difficult, in it taking a long time to get good, because they are difficult papers, and everybody's really going to be trying their best. But if you're looking for like around the 70% mark, and the higher you can get above that, the better. But really, there'll be people who get under 70% or that mark, but they'll have really good personal statements or really good predicted grades. And likewise, you may get unlucky and you may do really well, but for whatever reason, they don't see you as the candidate that they would like at that time. But really, it's so difficult statistically to get in and know the tips and tricks that you've got nothing to lose. Just absolutely try your best and don't take it personally at all if it doesn't go perfectly.
I agree. And I think that's the thing, is it's always a case of throw your hat in the ring and see how you get on. And I think sometimes they do miss really exceptional candidates, but you'll go off to other fabulous universities. And the other thing is they're really seeing if you will enjoy that style of learning as well. And if actually they don't think you will enjoy it, then you won't get an offer. And actually you'll probably go somewhere else that would suit you and you'd enjoy more. And then let's talk about the TSA. So did you have to do critical thinking? Was it kind of arguments, counter arguments, those kind of things? Were those the questions, premises, questions like that?
Yeah, the 25 wordy questions would often be in the form of a big block of text, and you would have every time 5 options, and it might ask you a fairly straightforward deduction, which would be which of the following conclusions best suit the above text, but it may ask you to look for a flaw or a weakness or a good counter argument. And once again, that's definitely the wordy questions. Once you get good at reading them at a fast pace, definitely look online just for those extra tips, because actually year on year they use many of the same templates of questions, but they will just change the words here and there. So there's definitely a good opportunity to pick up good marks in the wordy questions.
That's brilliant. And then how about the maths questions? What are they like?
The one big bit of advice I would give, and as well, there are admissions tests such as the BMAT, and I think maths will have its own admissions test. All these different subjects demand different things, and they can be even more mind-bending than the TSA. So there really is plenty of practice you can get, but ultimately there'll be the sort of mathsy brain teasers where the first answer you get is probably not the right answer. There's probably something you're missing. It's just looking at the sort of tips and tricks. There might be quite a lot of spatial reasoning. There'll be lots of tables and charts where you have to work through the best. There are just straight up very difficult questions, but you don't get a calculator. Nothing's going to require really complex formulae. It's just, are you able to keep these certain aspects in your mind to best reach a solution in the question?
Very interesting. And then do you remember what the essay was that you did? What was that about?
Yes, the essay part of the TSA, it's quite interesting. The best advice I was given was to never take the questions at face value. Once again, they're not looking for, you might have a question, for example, that will say only road users should pay a certain tax to maintain roads. And so you could go, in a 2015 study that I've read, this deduced the following. And an Oxford admissions tutor, they might like that. They might like your resourcefulness and that you've read well. But often in these questions, there'll be a question underneath once you scratch the surface. And really, for one like that, it might be talking more widely about what are the principles of taxation. Should they apply to only the users, or should they apply nationwide? And so once you can make very nuanced debates like that just go a little bit deeper and look at the arguments for and the arguments against, and you discuss the principles while still making sure that you're referring to the question and you are answering the question by the end. But really, again, there will be a million different ways that you could approach it, and I would once again just tell people to look online, see what advice you can find, see what works best for you, because I think the essay was something that went particularly well for me, whereas I actually think, despite all my practice, the other part of the paper could have gone better on the day. So a lot of hard work can go into it, and it might not go perfect on the day, but you might as well try.
And also what's interesting is that sounds a lot like history, insofar as you have an argument, a counter argument, or for example, an English literature essay, we've got AO5, testing out kind of whether you can debate a perspective and debate another perspective. But I think also that what's lovely about all the admissions tests, and I think this is really positive, insofar as if you do have an essay part, there aren't assessment objectives. Whereas, for example, in an A-level subject, if you're doing, for example, English literature or history, you're looking at specific assessment objectives. In fact, all A-levels, you've got to hit certain things. Whereas I think that's nice about the admissions test, is actually they're looking for the way you think. And if they think the way you think is interesting, then you might get to interview, and they want to see how your mind works, whether you can discuss things from different perspectives. So that sounds really interesting. And then you got to interview, and I did your mock interview.
Yeah.
And so tell me about, how did that feel, the mock interview? So you did that with myself and someone else who I call in. So I call in a favor. How did you find that?
Like any interview that you'll ever experience in your life, it's very nerve-wracking, just because you want to make sure you get your words out clearly, and regardless of the content, there are so many things that you worry will go wrong. The Oxford process used to be in person, but I think in future years they will be more likely to consider using the virtual aspect, and that I think worked quite well for me. You are not sweating profusely, you're just in the comfort of your home, and that's a useful part. But you can try and prepare as best as you can, but the questions that you asked, and in the real interview that were asked, it's just, you've got to stay calm and just slowly articulate the argument that you want to reach. Don't be afraid to admit when you're wrong. Equally, if you are making an assertion, see if you can back it up. They don't want people who crumble immediately. It's people who are able to think in, as you well know, and you'll tell all of your Reach students that the best thinkers are ones who say, I don't know sometimes, can you give me a bit more information and see what I can deduce?
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting about when we were interviewing you in the mock interview was that you paused, you took time, and actually you had that time to kind of process, and then you just talk through what you were thinking. And I think that was really helpful. And what was interesting was we actually looked at some political graphs, and we looked at, and you then drew out some really interesting dates that you knew of. You brought in some stuff you knew from history, some things you knew from kind of political reading. And actually, it was quite interesting hearing the way your brain was working. Also, I thought was really very impressive about the way you went to interviews. You were quite clear and you didn't rush. And actually, it was really nice that you kind of had your things to say and then you kind of stopped. And also when you did make mistakes, which actually myself and my colleague, that is really important parts of the process of being in an interview, is people who are interviewing you for Oxford and Cambridge want you to be okay with mistakes. And I think I've said this many times in Reach lessons, but at A-level, we test you on things you already know. So I'm asking my students a question on, I've just read a scene of Streetcar Measure for Measure, and I say, well, what do we learn here? What do we find out about this character? I'm testing on things you know. Whereas I think an interview, and again, at supervisions and tutorials, they want to make sure that you can make mistakes and backtrack. Oh no, okay, so I've got that more information. I've made a mistake there. Let me try again. I'm not sure that was right. And that dialogue. And if you can do that, make mistakes, pick yourself up, have another go, then they might give you an offer. And again, if you don't find making mistakes easy, you might not enjoy the teaching of Oxbridge, because that's the mechanism they teach with. And then tell me about the process. So you then got absolutely unbelievable A-level results and an EPQ, obviously. And then tell me a little bit about what has happened since then. So you've got reading lists, and tell me a little bit about how they're already preparing you to arrive. You seem to have some new parents.
Yeah, one of the brilliant perks of the Oxford and presumably Oxbridge systems are that the way that both universities work is they're actually made of almost mini universities, which are colleges, not in the same sense as the sixth form college at Hereford. You will be firstly, well, you'll be under the whole umbrella of the University of Oxford, and then you'll have a college, mine is Brasenose College, where you will be more specifically taught and housed and live most of your university life. And the parents you're alluding to you get to meet and speak to people who are the year above you who have also done your course, and they'll give you extra advice on ways to target how you learn, and a little bit more guidance on the reading list, because there are plenty of books that get thrown at you, and it's good to know which order you should read them and where you should put emphasis.
Yes, definitely. The reading lists, I mean, you just feel quite intimidated. Good. So you've got college parents. And what are you looking forward to most about studying and getting back into it all?
It will be, I think, utterly amazing. I'll be so lucky to just be studying the thing I really wanted to study at the best possible place I could study it. And, I really do appreciate how statistically unlikely it is to even get to this stage. And it's just a great feeling to be in that lucky few who will, there are so many universities across the country, but Oxford is where I really wanted to go, and just living that academic life, doing the subjects I love, will just be amazing.
And I think that's the thing, is that actually, if you loved your subject, you'll find a university that suits you,
Absolutely.
a course that suits you as well. But Sam, it's been absolutely fantastic to chat, and hopefully we'll be in touch with you as the years go on. But thank you so much for your hints and tips, applying for PPE, the TSA, and all the things about your courses. So thanks so much for your time.
No problem. Thank you for having me.